What goes into your mind drives what comes out of it. A lot of entrepreneurs are very intentional about what they produce, but often quite unintentional about what they consume. Thank you for listening to Routine is Revenue. This is your place to build routines and bank results. I'm Ildikó Sealey, your routine and performance strategist, and I'm completely and utterly obsessed with the connection between your intellectual health, in this instance, what you feed your mind, and the quality of what your business produces. So this episode is for you if you are consuming a lot, you're learning constantly, but you are still feeling like your thinking isn't quite as sharp or as clear as it should be, or as it could be. If you are ready to audit what's going in, let's go. In this routine reset, we look at input quality. And this is the principle that what you consume mentally and intellectually directly shapes what you create professionally. And how becoming more deliberate about your intellectual diet is actually one of the highest leverage changes available to a business owner. Now, if you haven't already, please hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Thank you. Okay, let me ask you something. When did you last actively choose what to put into your mind rather than just letting it arrive? Most of us have a very curated output. We think so long and so hard about what we post, what we write, what we say to clients. Would you agree? But how about the input into our own head? That is often just whatever is there. And depending on where we consume input, we have sometimes very little choice because it is completely the algorithm's choice. So let's have a look at what drives that. You know, the group chat you are in, the webinar that sounded so interesting that will be on at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday. But the thing about input quality is that the brain doesn't distinguish between useful and useless consumption in that moment. To the brain, it all feels like learning. But over time, what you consistently feed your brain and mind shapes a lot of things, like the patterns of thoughts you have access to, the references that you draw on, the quality of your ideas, and the speed and clarity of your own decisions. Have you ever heard the phrase GIGO, which is garbage in, garbage out? Now, it's apparently a common computing term, which, interestingly, I only came across while researching for this episode. But the interesting part is that it applies just as directly to intellectual health as it does to computing. Now, as we covered with application loops in Routine Reset 17 a little while ago, the problem for so many busy business owners like yourself certainly isn't that they don't learn enough. The problem comes from consuming indiscriminately and applying almost nothing, yet not having the application loop built into your practice. So input quality is the upstream version of the same problem. If what you are consuming isn't worth applying, the loop was probably broken even before it started. So the question isn't just what you are learning, it's what is that learning actually doing to the quality of your thinking? So let me emphasize something here that very much reflects my own business motto too. The quality of your business can never exceed the quality of your thinking. Does it make sense? Do please ask questions in the comments if you have any. Right, let's move on. So here are 3 things that can instantly improve your input quality. Auditing what's coming in, replacing rather than reducing, and timing your consumption deliberately. So first of all, auditing. What's coming in? This means spending 5 minutes every week listing every source that regularly enters your mind. There could be podcasts, social feeds, newsletters, group chats, YouTube, world news, conversations with people, absolutely anything and everything in between. And then ask yourself honestly, does this sharpen my thinking or does it scatter it? Does it inform my professional decisions or does it just waste them? Now keep doing this until you get to a list of things that are to your benefit. You never know. You might be surprised what doesn't actually survive these questions. Now, closely relating to this audit is the act of replacing rather than reducing. I love this swap out approach and I use it a lot in my program. Basically, you're not necessarily consuming less, but you just ensure that you are consuming better content and content relating to your business. So here are some simple examples. If you find that you've got a podcast that's become noise, just remove it and replace it with one that's directly relevant to where you are trying to go. Or if you identify a social feed that triggers unhealthy comparison, please mute it and then replace that scroll time with a book chapter that's actually building something useful for you. And finally, a useful exercise is timing your consumption deliberately. And that means protecting your peak thinking hours from input and saving consumption for those low energy time slots. And I went into detail on this last week with time allocation. So all in all, respect yourself by not starting your day with other people's thoughts before you've had your own. You know by now that scientifically, the morning is probably your sharpest window for creating and deciding. Now, one of my one-to-one clients had a pattern I think you will recognize. Picture the scene. It was nearly 9 o'clock at night. She was asleep in her office chair. Again. The webinar was still playing. Her daughter walked in. "Mom." Now, as it happens, her mornings were beautifully structured. She had a cold plunge, 3 glasses of water, no coffee for a good hour and a half. She was so proud of it. Her evenings, on the other hand, were quite the opposite. Glass of wine, late dinner, eaten during the webinar. She fell asleep over in her office chair. Now, ironically, she actually described it herself as night and day. So what was driving it? Well, have a wild guess. And do you suffer with it? Well, I can admit that I do. It was FOMO. Her ADHD brain wanted to learn absolutely everything. Her intention was right because this was her career, this was what lit her up. And the reframe that shifted things was very, very simple. If you can't schedule an hour to implement what you've learned, there is no point scheduling the webinar at all. Because otherwise it's not learning. It's just simply entertainment. So let's sum this up. What if the input stays unmanaged? You allow yourself more webinars than you can process. You keep looking at feeds and keep scrolling. Instead of muting or even leaving the group chats, they just keep pinging. And your mind keeps trying to take it all in, process it all, filing it all somewhere. But the subtle cost is this. An overloaded mind defaults to surface level thinking. And it has too much coming in to go deep on anything else. So what happens to the business ideas, the strategic insights, the creative solutions that require genuine depth? Well, those will just stop arriving. And over time, you might mistake that feeling of consuming for the feeling of thinking. But it's important to know that they are not the same thing. One fills your head, the other builds your business. Now, the moral of the story is that what you let into your mind is a decision. So please, make it deliberately. Because when you start being intentional about what goes into your mind, you will be intentional about what comes out of it. I'd really hope that becoming intentional is not going to be after the next course that you watch, but now. Nor when you've finished binge watching the current mindless series. Just do that analysis now. Carry out just one audit and do one swap. Set just one boundary around your peak thinking hours. And then let me know, does this reflect a pattern you've been half aware of for some time? If yes, then your next step is actually quite simple. Before you fill your mind with the next podcast, webinar, or book, Just spend a few minutes learning something that actually matters about you. In addition, you can also take the hidden bottleneck quiz using the link in the show notes, and it will help you identify the underlying pattern that's most affecting your energy, your focus, and your personal performance, so you know where to direct your attention first. And in the meantime, please feed your mind like it matters, because everything you create comes from it. And remember, a healthier you makes a wealthier you.